Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, of course, we have more war and rumors of war in the news. We also have wildfires that are continuing to burn in the provinces of Canada. A solution to actually deal with what one country is calling an overpopulation of a water pest.
If you can actually call it a solution.
I guess you could possibly call that. Actually treating the waters with herpes, which seems like it would do more harm than benefit, and many other things to bring you as we cover this episode of YPN News. But we're going to first start off with more trouble in Syria. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has gone to Geneva in an attempt to revive those stalled ceasefire talks. The Free Syrian Army said that they would never accept a ceasefire and have actually removed themselves from the talks. According to Abayomi Azikiwe of the Pan-African Newswire, he said, as a result, it'll be difficult to achieve any type of ceasefire because we don't have a comprehensive recognition of a cessation of hostilities taking place.
John Kerry, speaking from Geneva, thanked Staffan de Mistura, the UN envoy on Syria, for his efforts to give life to a political process in the midst of a conflict that is in many ways out of control and deeply disturbing to everybody in the world, I hope, he said.
It definitely is disturbing. Mr. Mistura said the special envoy to Syria, he spoke saying that the next round of talks concerning Syria will only be meaningful if there is a cessation of hostilities and brought back to the level that we saw in February and March. Hence, my appeal for U.S. and Russia is an urgent initiative at the highest level because the legacy of both presidents, Obama and Putin, is linked to the success of what has been a unique initiative which started very well, and it also needs to end very well, he said.
Meanwhile, in Syria, the government launched more airstrikes in the rebel-controlled area of Aleppo for the past 9 days, and according to reports, killing at least 250 civilians as a result. Now, the new partial truce created by the U.S. and Russia is holding in the northern parts of Syria and Latakia province and in Damascus. But for some reason, the truce doesn't apply to Aleppo, where so much of the fighting is taking place as the Syrian regime, backed by Russia and Iran, tries to recapture all of the city.
Interesting. The ceasefire agreed to 2 months ago has broken down. Recently, one of the few remaining hospitals in Aleppo controlled by the rebels was destroyed by an airstrike. That hospital was run by Doctors Without Borders, an international aid group. It said that it was targeted by a direct hit and at least 50 people were killed as a result.
The International Committee of the Red Cross said that 4 more areas, including a cardiac facility, were attacked as well those in both the rebel and regime-controlled areas. And the aid group has called for an end to indiscriminate violence.
Well, all violence is what they really need an end to.
That's right.
A refugee camp in Syria near the Turkish border was in ruin as airstrikes hit, killing many of the displaced civilians, men, women, and children. One refugee said, "We are displaced people, and we were set on fire. They set tents in a restricted space ablaze." Well, hundreds of people had sought refuge in the camp after fleeing neighboring Aleppo and Hama provinces. The attack took place in rebel-held territory controlled by Syria's al-Qaeda affiliate, the al-Nusra Front. However, it is still unclear who is responsible for the airstrike on that camp.
Well, U.S. White House spokesman Josh Earnest issued a swift condemnation of the attack, saying there is no justifiable excuse for carrying out an airstrike against innocent civilians who have already once fled their homes to escape violence. The UN has called for an immediate investigation, with one top official saying that the attack could be called a war crime.
Well, continuing with war crimes, the U.S. Central Command has stated that a U.S. airstrike on a Doctors Without Borders hospital in Afghanistan last year will not be prosecuted as a war crime. Joseph Votel of the U.S. Central Command said this investigation concluded that this tragic accident was caused by a combination of human errors compounded by process and equipment failures. The investigation concluded that certain personnel failed to comply with rules of engagement in the law of armed conflict.
He continued, however, the investigation did not conclude that these errors resulted in a war crime. Now, the label war crimes is typically reserved for intentional acts.
Interesting. A Human Rights Watch group has accused Saudi Arabia of using cluster munitions in its war against Yemen, with evidence of mounting civilian casualties. That's right, the rights group has called for the U.S. to stop manufacturing and selling internationally banned weapons in compliance with international law. Well, the group also said that the U.S. has endangered many civilian lives because of the sale of the banned weapons. The weapons have been banned in 119 countries, since 2008.
Now, Riyadh invaded Yemen over a year ago, and so far over 9,400 people have lost their lives as a result of this latest war.
U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter accused Russia of nuclear saber rattling and promised to counter increased Russian aggression by increasing military buildup through NATO's presence along Russia's borders. Well, NATO is a key aspect of U.S. security policy. The Baltic Sea is a friction point between Russia, the U.S., and NATO because of the military exercises underway. And of course, there have also been a lot of close calls in that area.
Russia has criticized NATO's joint exercises in Georgia later this month. The Russian foreign minister has accused the alliance of trying to destabilize the region and described the training of the Georgian troops by NATO as provocative. Now, Russia and NATO have been at odds at what Russia describes as the eastern expansion of the alliance as a means of encircling the country of Russia.
As a result, the Kremlin has beefed up its troops along the borders with Eastern Europe and in countries where NATO exists.
Now, as the tensions increase with Russia, North Korea is also in the news with suspicions that they might be getting ready to launch another test fire. Now, Larry McGee has the details on this story as well as several others. Larry, what are we seeing here with North Korea?
It is satellite images that are causing relevant nations to suspect that North Korea is preparing to launch its fifth nuclear test fire. The information comes from Johns Hopkins University's School of Advanced International Study, which reports images of movements in an area which has only shown activity prior to a nuclear testing. Experts suggest that the images point to a test fire in the near future and has prompted U.S. officials to request that the North Korean head refrain from actions and language which further destabilize the region. Meanwhile, the head of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, announced intentions for Israel to upgrade its relationship with NATO this week. According to the Prime Minister, Israel aims to open a permanent mission to the headquarters of the military alliance in Brussels in the near days ahead. The Israeli Foreign Ministry had previously announced that NATO had invited Israel to open an office at its headquarters, with nations such as Turkey reportedly being pressured to drop their veto on closer ties with Israel. Relations have been strained between the two nations in recent years. Israel has, however, joined in joint military exercises with NATO nations other than Turkey. The promises of freedom and peace through democratization in Iraq are continuing to fail as thousands of Shia protesters stormed the Iraqi parliament building this week. The latest uprising occurred after lawmakers failed to convene for a vote to reform the government. Video footage shows hordes of protesters charging into the government building with camera phones in hand to tape the event. The government itself was forced to declare a state of emergency because of the unrest. Quite a few are disturbed over the fact that the protesters were able to intrude into the so-called Green Zone, which houses not only the Iraqi parliament, but also its high tribunal and the U.S. Embassy. The UN released a statement conveying its grave concern over the events and urged calm restraint and respect for Iraq's constitutional institutions. Thousands of troops have reportedly now been deployed to prevent any further such incursions. More political unrest and uprisings elsewhere as a march in Paris turned violent after a group of hooded and masked youths began hurling objects at police. Parisian police were actually forced into a corner, at which point they began to employ tear gas. Opportunists saw the brawl as an opportunity to vandalize, inflicting property damage on shops and bus shelters. Eyewitnesses report innocent bystanders, some elderly, being caught in the crossfire before police finally stopped the demonstration by dividing the crowd in half in order to get a handle on the violence. Shame and embarrassment for the political leaders of Turkey also this week after an all-out brawl broke out during discussions over the heated topic of ending parliamentary members' immunity from being prosecuted. Shocking video footage shows the humbug going full blast, including women and MPs jumping off of tables and into the fight like a mosh pit. The incident is reportedly not a rare occurrence. Recently, another scuffle erupted over the same bill, resulting in it having to be postponed. Though the bill is said to aim at removing immunity from all MPs, pro-Kurdish ATDP party believes that it is being unfairly targeted, and some believe with great reason. The head of Turkey released a statement saying, "Neither we nor this nation can be expected to make an effort to tolerate deputies who do nothing but act as a mouthpiece for the separatist terrorist organization." For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Wow. It seems like it would be difficult for any country to find a solution, especially if the leaders are actually using war as an answer. That's very sad. Well, love continues to grow cold as Dayton police say a man approached the World of Wonder school playground on Friday afternoon and stabbed a 7-year-old girl. The girl was seriously injured and the suspect was still at large as police searched into the evening for him with a canine unit. The attacker was thought to be somewhere between 18 and 20 years old and a little shorter than 6 feet. There is no clear motive for the crime, and the victim is not being identified due to her age.
Well, Puerto Rico, home to almost 4 million Americans, is facing a perfect storm scenario due to a combination of $70 billion worth of debt and the spread of the Zika virus. Now, just this week, the island's Commonwealth failed to repay almost $400 million worth of debt and is now facing a $2 billion repayment in July.
Wow. Doctors on the island are fearing the financial crisis could have a terrible effect on the Zika outbreak. Dr. Gloria Rodriguez Vega of the Zika is on the front line and dealing with this virus, of course, has been forced to lay off 500 employees over recent months, even as the cases of Zika virus and related issues continue to rise. And of course, the hospitals are trying to bear the burden of that as well. We have a financial crisis at this point, she told CBS News, and it's a humanitarian crisis. It's a health crisis.
Other hospitals are in danger of closing completely. Dr. Diana Otaro explains resources are already stretched thin and it's tough to get lab tests done. Now, there have been 707 confirmed cases of Zika on the island since November, 89 of which were pregnant women. And of course, Katan, this virus is also, as we reported, it's known to have very crippling birth defects associated with it.
That's right. And it's not only the children, adults are also suffering from the complications of the virus like Guillain-Barré syndrome, which causes paralysis in some and can even cause death. While the CDC is racing to develop a better test for Zika, it is estimated that a quarter of the island's population could contract the virus this year. Those are some staggering statistics.
Dr. Jorge Munoz from the CDC commented, we will have more and more cases. It's just very hard. It's just a very hard virus to stop. Now, Puerto Rico is worried that the virus will affect their tourist trade as well.
Wow. North Americans also have more to worry about this summer. The Zika virus looks like it may spread further north than first thought. Initially, the virus was limited to the Aedes aegypti mosquito common to the southern United States. Now, however, Zika has been discovered in a second species that ranges as far north as Maine and Minnesota.
Wow. Well, the CDC is warning the Aedes aegypti mosquito, the main species that carries Zika, could extend into Connecticut this year. But 2 weeks ago in Mexico, the first case of Zika was found in the Asian tiger mosquito. Now, this strain of mosquito is a very common species in northern states like Connecticut.
Australia thinks they have found the solution to get rid of what they call the worst freshwater aquatic pest which has invaded their waterways. Well, they're going to introduce a strain of the herpesvirus. That's right, herpesvirus into the Murray-Darling River Basin.
Now, the government made the announcement on May 1st, and according to Science Minister Christopher Pyne, the plan will eliminate about 95% of European carp in Australia's river system. Now, this equates to thousands of tons of fish, maybe even millions of tons of fish. And of course, they're going to be dead fish, which they're trying to kill them using the herpes virus.
Yeah, it seems like there will be a better way to deal with that, especially since there's so much starvation taking place in the world right now. The plan is to release the carp-specific strain of herpes in 2018, costing the government 15 million Australian dollars. Recently, Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce was quite outspoken during a parliament meeting explaining the plan to his colleagues. Well, let's take a listen to what he had to say.
That we should be getting rid of these disgusting mud-sucking creatures to more support some of the better animals of our waterways, the silver perch and the yellow belly and the Murray cod and the eastern cod and the catfish. But we don't want to have to deal with carp. No, we don't want to deal with carp. We've got to get rid of the carp. Because when we've dealt with this virus, do you know, Mr. Speaker, that we're going to have between 500,000 and 2 million tonnes of carp. 2 million tonnes of carp. We'll have to bury the carp. We'll have to put it outside, put it in the paddocks, bury it, put it underground, probably take the place of horse manure or something. But it's incredibly important that we have a healthy nation. We need a healthy nation and a strong economy, And you've got to go to some extreme measures at times to make sure we keep our economy and our environment healthy, even if it does require a version of a venereal disease to deal with it.
Quite outspoken indeed. Well, as a side note, in September 2015, Minister Joyce assumed a portfolio responsibility for water policy and was sworn in as Minister for Agriculture and Water Resources. And I think, Katan, the question that people would have to be asking, or maybe Mr. Joyce himself, is, once the herpes kill the fish, where then is it going to go into our agriculture and other waterways, since he is the expert on the issue?
Yeah, well, I guess time will tell, and hopefully no more have to suffer as a result. Well, another fish kill of a different kind took place this week in a Haikua City lake in South China's Hainan province. But this time, the reason for tons of dead fish is unknown. Social media showed workers cleaning up the fish from the lake.
Local newspapers report 35 tons of dead fish have already been removed from the water, and authorities are warning people to stay away from the scene as samples of the dead fish are being examined to determine the cause of death. And that has to be very unsettling, not to know what caused 35 tons of fish just to die and wash ashore.
Yeah, and it's got to make you wonder, especially if they're drawing other resources off of that water. Yeah. Well, for over 100 years, it has been a household name in America. But now, Johnson & Johnson has lost a second multi-million-dollar lawsuit due to claims that its baby powder has cancer-causing ingredients. And this is only the beginning. There are more than 1,000 other lawsuits pending.
A St. Louis courtroom ordered Johnson & Johnson to pay $55 million to 62-year-old Gloria Ristenson. Ristenson used the talcum powder as a feminine hygiene product for 40 years. Now, never suspecting the talcum contained in it was a cause of her ovarian cancer. And that's the point there that many are disagreeing that that's what caused her cancer. And as we'll see as we continue with the article, that very prominent companies here are disagreeing with this finding. Now, she sued the company for failing to warn about the possible risks associated with talcum.
Interesting. Ristenson's attorney showed jurors documents that suggested Johnson & Johnson knew about the risk and downplayed them. Jerry Beasley, the plaintiff's attorney, said of the company, "I think that's extremely uncaring," showing no concern whatsoever for the safety and welfare of the people that they are selling to.
The company, however, disagrees with the findings, issuing this statement which says, multiple scientific and regulatory reviews have determined that talc is safe for use in cosmetic products and the labeling on Johnson's baby powder is appropriate. Now, the American Cancer Society, however, says the research is inconclusive.
Oh, interesting. And it's really odd seeing that a place like the American Cancer Society would actually be jumping on this if the research actually backed that up. But in times past, I know that we have brought forth that certain strands of the HPV virus have been linked to cervical cancer and other types of cancer in both men and women, but never talcum powder, which is basically ground up rock.
Right.
So I guess we'll see where this goes from there. Questions are beginning to surface surrounding the death of a famous singer whose name was Prince. Well, federal drug enforcement agents are investigating who provided prescription painkillers that were found in his home. This comes as a doctor claims that he was working to help the rock legend fight drug addiction.
Now, in the last 24 hours of Prince's life, the singer was preparing to quit a drug addiction, according to Dr. Howard Kornfeld's attorney. Dr. Kornfeld is a nationally recognized addiction treatment specialist who runs an addiction facility in California. Kornfeld had sent his son, Andrew, to Minnesota to walk Prince through the recovery program at his home Thursday morning. But, of course, that's when the singer's body was discovered.
That's right. Andrew had a supply of addiction treatment medications with him. However, according to his attorney, no drugs were ever administered. Andrew Kornfeld has said that those medications were to be delivered to Prince's local doctor. But if authorities don't believe him, well, he could be criminally charged.
Well, being called the Beast by some, wildfire has exploded through dried forests in Alberta, Canada, forcing the largest mass evacuation in North America in decades. At least 90,000 people are on the run, living in emergency shelters, and most have no idea what has happened to their homes.
At least 1,600 houses are gone, and the city of Fort McMurray is in the fire's path. The dense, dry vegetation has firefighters saying there's very little they can do except let it burn itself out. Well, the blaze has been driven by strong winds, pushing and pulling the heat in all different directions.
Chad Morrison, Alberta's wildfire manager, told reporters this fire is a fuel-driven fire, which is a result of very dry drought conditions over a long period of time. We have not seen rain in this area for the last 2 months.
No. Thousands of evacuees are being flown to safety, and a convoy of 500 vehicles brought some evacuees back to what used to be their neighborhood, but many homes were burnt to the ground. As the fire continues to burn, local officials say the only thing that is going to end this wildfire is rain, and there isn't any in the forecast.
Wow. Well, from no rain to contaminated water, Cristobal Chavez used to get his family's drinking water out of their well in Central California, just outside of Bakersfield. Now, that has stopped as water from the well tested high for nitrates, bacteria, and other contaminants. Chavez is now forced to spend almost 10% of his $60,000 a year income on bottled water so that his family won't go thirsty.
Oh boy. At a cost of $30,000 to dig a new well, and no guarantee, in fact, that the water would be any better, Chavez is faced with the same dilemma as thousands of other California families in the same area. Some community groups are doing what little they can by installing filters on public drinking fountains.
Well, what comes to mind when you think of our national symbol? Some may think of the American flag or Statue of Liberty, but now there's a new one, the American buffalo. Now, the bill to make the American bison the national mammal passed Congress on April 28th of this year. Now, interestingly enough, there's a Native American prophecy that tells of a white buffalo coming in this very time period. However, the buffalo is not a four-legged one, but a two-legged one. In other words, a man who would come in the last days and would be teaching the way to peace.
Now, you can find out more about that white buffalo prophecy by contacting the House of Yahweh. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and the Prophetic Word magazine. And you can also ask for that white buffalo edition of the Prophetic Word magazine as well. You can contact the House of Yahweh by writing them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494 or visit any of the websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, www.yahwehsbranch.com, or www.ypnnews.com. You can also email them at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen. And also, don't forget the best Bible study tool on the market, the Yisrael Says program. You can find that at www.yisraelhawkinssays.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is the great white buffalo, Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.